Welcome to episode 10 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined in studio as always by my good friend, my co-host, the man who knows how to just get things done around here at Grace College and Theological Seminary, the guru of the Ministry Studies blended program here at Grace College and Theological Seminary, and our resident expert on the global epidemic sweeping the world, John Sloat.
Doc, what's happening?
Well, it is a lovely Tuesday morning here on the campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary.
Spring break right now?
Yeah, so that could mean that suddenly in the middle of this episode that below us, the Worship Arts Studio erupts in some sort of musical performance. So we'll have to monitor that. But the fact that it is, as we record this episode, early March, means that we are rapidly approaching March Madness.
March Madness, yeah. So if you fast forward through all the sports things, don't do that because we're not going to have a lot of sports topics today.
Yeah.
But whether you really enjoy college basketball or whether you don't enjoy college basketball, I'm going to encourage you to join us for our Various and Sundry podcast, March Madness tournament. The whole college basketball world is all over the place right now. So the tournament could go one of 1,000 different ways.
One of the most wide open years I have ever seen.
So if you don't know anything, jump in there, pick a winner, and we'll see. And you're giving away a book, right, for the winner?
Yeah, if you are fortunate enough to win the bracket competition, we will send you a signed copy of one of my books. Now, of course, if it's one of my family members, they're like,
they're not necessarily, yeah.
So they're just going to get bragging rights probably. But in any case, we'll hook you up with some merch.
And if you look in the show notes, we'll have a link where you can follow to get to that bracket. Join right now, Doc. It's just you and me in there, so we're doing well. We got 2 people, but we're hoping for a lot more, and we're hoping to get a lot of our listeners and excited to interact with them a little bit and see what they're like.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what is the information now? The brackets have not yet been released as of this day that we're recording here on March 10th, but you can still go ahead and sign up and get registered.
That's right.
And so what's the information that our listeners can go to there?
So it's on Yahoo, so you'll need a Yahoo account, and our bracket is called the Various and Sundry podcast. The password is all lowercase, Grace Seminary, one word, and the group number is 8742. We'll put that in the show notes. We'll tweet that out, and you can follow us at VNSPod. And if you have questions or if you're struggling, you can email us at variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com, and we'd be more than happy to help you.
Yeah, we'd love to see a large number of our listeners participate in this. And just an encouragement that even if you don't know the first thing about college basketball, in my experience, people who are in that situation often perform quite well in these bracket competitions, much to the frustration of people like me who pay attention to college basketball and find that ends up being ultimately a disadvantage sometimes.
Yeah. I've found that to be true also.
So in lieu of a more extended sports segment, we are going to dive right in to a story that, again, I'll just say, we were way out in front of this story.
We beat the national media
about
to this,
the coronavirus.
Really. Yeah.
If the national media would just pay attention to us,
that's right,
they would know where they should be reporting well in advance. And so we are going to talk a little bit more about the coronavirus, which obviously has moved from one of those stories that's kind of like, oh, that's kind of happening overseas, and that's something that I should maybe be loosely aware of, to becoming the dominant story in our news cycle here in the United States. And so I thought we'd start with, why don't you give us sort of the latest numbers as of this morning here on March 10th.
Yeah, what sort of numbers do you want is really the question.
Let's go global. Let's go big picture global, and then we'll move down to here in the U.S.
Yeah, so we're looking at goodness, probably getting close to 120, 125, 130,000 confirmed cases. Now, that doesn't account for all the cases that are out there, but just the ones that have been tested. And as testing becomes more available in the United States, we're finding more and more cases throughout the United States. So it's probably going to take a couple weeks for us to get a real picture of what this even looks like in the United States.
So where are we at then in the United States in terms of numbers?
Let me pull it up here. Let me crunch the numbers. We're at about 755. So that number will continue to climb, I think.
Absolutely.
Over the next few weeks.
Absolutely. And in fact, we have our first reported cases here in the great state of Indiana, where we are based. In fact, I know of I saw a news report of a elementary school student in just outside of Indianapolis that was confirmed as having the coronavirus, and therefore that elementary school has shut down for 2 weeks. And then there's another case just north of here, Fort Wayne, that has been confirmed. And so this is something that's going to be, pretty much anyone listening to this podcast is probably going to, at some level, end up being indirectly, at least, impacted by this coronavirus.
And we're seeing a lot of colleges cancel courses and cancel residential classes. So if that were to happen at Grace, I know Columbia University in New York City has done that. I know Ohio State has done something to that effect as well. And
through the month of March, all residential courses at the Ohio State University.
Do they have cases on campus at Ohio State?
I've not seen any reported cases that I'm aware of.
That feels like a big reaction to to nothing being on campus.
But it is either the first or second largest, residential campus in the United States in terms of colleges. So I assume they're just trying to get out in front of it.
Okay.
But
now, Doc, if Grace goes, if the college that you and I work at, if they go, hey, we're canceling all classes to the end of March, what is Matt Harmon going to do to make up that work? Is he going to have all his students Skype in? Like, what's the plan?
Yeah, I haven't put a ton of thought into that, but my guess is we would have to do some sort of either Skyping in or probably more realistically would have to be, I guess you could do maybe a Zoom kind of meeting kind of concept where everyone connects in. But more likely would just be I would record lectures that would make up for the missed in-class time, and then it would essentially convert to a kind of online class until we resumed face-to-face meetings.
Do you look forward to that?
Not in the least. Not in the least.
I know. I have a night class this coming 8 weeks, and I am thinking through like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And I think it's going to be just that. I think I would sit in front of my computer at my office and talk through my notes, either live or recorded, and have students listen to it. Yeah,
less than ideal for sure. But I will say that the coronavirus has had an impact on my own family, not my absolute immediate nuclear family, but.
Which was a mistake, right?
Right, apparently from David Brooks's perspective. Yeah, if you want to go back to episode, I don't know what that was,
I think
6
that was
or something.
2 ago, yeah.
Who knows? But so my nephew competed in a Special Olympics event out in Omaha, Nebraska. And apparently it was discovered after the fact that the first confirmed case of the coronavirus in that area, that person attended that event and I think was a participant in the event.
Oh, goodness.
So as a result, my sister-in-law and my nephew are on a self-imposed 2-week quarantine at home.
Oh, goodness. Now, the self-imposed, was it encouraged?
Strongly encouraged.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, from what I understand, the organizers of the event contacted all of the participants and their families and said, hey, here's the deal. We're strongly encouraging a self-imposed 2-week home quarantine. And so that was as of a couple of days ago that think I found out about this, 2 days ago. So they're like day 2 or 3 on the self-imposed quarantine.
Any symptoms or anything going on? I mean, that you got to be getting daily updates.
None
from
so
them.
far.
Okay.
None so far. So that's good.
Another way this is impacting us is you and I have a conference we attend. Middle of April.
Yep.
Every other year. And what would you mind? It's called Together for the Gospel, T4G. And would you mind breaking down a little bit about what that conference is and what it's like, what we've experienced there, and then the email we got last night?
Yeah. So this Together for the Gospel conference began, I want to say, in 2006.
That sounds right.
And really, it is a gathering of not just pastors, though that's kind of the sweet spot of kind of who they're targeting in a lot of ways in terms of the message and the content.
Yeah.
But pastors and such who are interested in the connection between the gospel and theology, and it really has become this mega conference. And I believe last year there were maybe 2 years ago, 10 to 12,000 attendees, and it's hosted in the KFC Yum Center in downtown Louisville, which is a basketball arena.
A massive, beautiful basketball arena.
Where the University of Louisville plays their basketball games. And so it's a great conference. The sort of the key organizers are men like Mark Dever, Lig Duncan, Al Mohler, and really I guess those are the 3 main ones left at this point. There have been others who have been a part of the origins of that.
And they have some regular speakers like John Piper.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of some other guys.
David Platt, Matt Chandler, Kevin DeYoung. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, it's kind of become a who's who of Reformed evangelicals when it comes to this conference, and it is a ton of preaching.
It's a lot of preaching. Yeah.
And also some great times of worship led by Bob Coughlin. And part of what makes that a unique experience is it's just piano. It's just him playing the piano and leading singing. And so you really hear the voices.
Yeah,
and so
it's incredible.
It's a remarkable experience to hear 12,000 voices, largely male voices, singing in a basketball arena, and just the sound and the effect of that is really quite moving.
And they make a CD of it every year, right? And you can buy the CD. And
not every year, but there's been 4 of them now that have been released.
Huh. And they also put out a little booklet every year with the different messages in it. And one of my favorite parts, because I'm selfish, is they have a bookstore called the $0 Bookstore.
Yes.
And you walk around and you just get all these free books.
Yeah.
And not like low level, just okay books. I mean, there are some mega authors from some mega publishers, and they're wonderful. Like you almost need to bring a second bag just to carry it around that day.
Yes.
And you and I both have enjoyed that immensely.
Right. And it's become a highlight that we look forward to every other year. And we've, in the last probably 4 or 5 times, I've taken students, and you've kind of picked up that mantle and taken the leadership of that now with taking a group of students down.
Yeah, I think we're taking 12 or 13 this year, 14 maybe students.
Yes. Lord willing, because we got that email last night, and we were I had been looking because they're talking about canceling basketball games or at least
playing in empty arenas, and so I was like, this conference takes place in a basketball arena that they're thinking about having empty for the NCAA tournament,
right?
So it doesn't take a lot to put those two things together.
Correct.
And so I had been searching their website looking for something, and last night we finally got an official statement from them about the COVID-19.
Yes. Yeah.
And
so summarize that for us.
Yeah. Basically, their thought was we are working with who? We are working with the World Health
Rock Band? Oh, no.
Yes.
You mean the World Health Organization.
Yes, the band Who is coming to T4G.
Yes,
you heard it here first.
That's a dated reference, I'm sure, for most of our listening audience, perhaps. But
World Health Organization, they're working with the CDC and local Louisville officials where the conference takes place,
right.
determine whether they should go forward. And right now they're planning on it.
Right.
But it very much felt like a first step.
Yeah, it very much did. And I'm sure part of it was they have to have been getting inquiries.
A ton of questions.
A ton of questions from people. And so in one sense, this just makes sense as instead of, dealing with all these inquiries, if we just make a public statement that says essentially we're looking into it, we're monitoring the situation closely, just hold on kind of thing, that that makes sense. That seems like a prudent thing to do when it comes to this issue. So we'll see if it happens.
I'm going to ask you for a prediction.
You want to?
I want a prediction about what's going to happen. Yes, absolutely. We need more hot takes. And then we're going to hold you accountable to that.
There you go. Okay, sure. Because that's what happens with hot takes. They always get held accountable, right?
One of my favorite Twitter follows is Freezing Cold Takes.
Yeah, that's good.
And they repost old hot takes that were just wrong.
It's great. I love that.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So you're asking for my hot take.
I'm asking for a hot take or a prediction about T4G.
Okay. So I think they're going to cancel it. But I think they're going to live stream messages. So I think they'll have the men who are going to speak. I think they will go ahead and speak in some context. They're not going to do it in the empty basketball arena. My guess is maybe they'll do it on campus at Southern, since that's right next door,
right down the street. Yep.
And they'll get in the media studio at Southern, or they'll get in the chapel maybe at Southern and deliver it and live stream it. But my hot take is I don't think this conference is going to actually happen as a gathering.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I don't think they're going to have this conference. It would have to be trusting 10 to 12,000 people to say, you know what, I'm sick, I'm staying home.
Yeah,
and I just don't trust people to do that.
No,
at the end of the day.
No, I think that we're officially on record once this launches out into the world. But my hot take is I don't think that will happen. Now, just to be clear, that is based on absolutely no inside knowledge.
Yeah,
I have no internal connections to people who make anything close to these kind of decisions when it comes to.
You heard it here first. Matt Harmon has connections to T4G and knows everything that's going on.
That's right. So I guess we'll test whether I have the gift of prophecy or not. So this segment will at least produce that. So.
All right. Well, speaking of coronavirus and getting sick, one of the things it calls for is rest.
Yeah.
And this is something that came up at the end of not at the end, kind of in the middle, and it hit me in the moment like, ooh, we should have a conversation about rest.
Yeah.
So, Matt Harmon, could you maybe summarize for us how rest and work interplay from a biblical perspective in just a couple of minutes? Sure. And then we can have a broader conversation about rest.
Right. When you look at the creation account itself, the fact that you have the pattern of God creating in 6 days and then noting that on the seventh day God rested certainly establishes this kind of pattern, this rhythm that God has built into creation itself of work is good, work is a high and divine calling, and yet it is not intended to be a constant state. God did not create the world to be in a constant state of work, that he built within it the rhythms of work and rest. And so you see that playing out even as the Old Testament develops in terms of God instituting the Sabbath, where the Israelites were commanded to work 6 days a week, and then on the seventh day they were commanded to rest, to stop their sort of normal kind of pattern of activity, whether it's working in the fields or those sorts of things, and to set aside time to devote towards worshiping the Lord and to stopping of work activity, which when you sort of step outside of the biblical record, even just from a scientific perspective, it becomes very clear that God made us to need rest. I've just been fascinated by the fact that God made us as human beings in such a way that our whole body has to shut down for an extended period of time every 24-hour cycle in order to be able to function normally, right?
Sure. Yeah, like a third of
Yeah.
that 24-hour cycle.
Yeah, so what does that even, and I think that's something that was true before the fall. I don't think that human beings were just in this constant state of alertness before the fall, and then sleep is the result of that. I think that God built us that way. And even looking at not just human beings, but even just creation itself, you see that embedded in other creatures as well. This pattern of wakefulness and activity, and then a stopping of that. So,
yeah, and there's no better way for us to say, God, I'm not in control of this, than to lay down and sleep.
Yeah,
To say that, you know what, I'm going to be defenseless for the next however long, 6 to 8 hours,
right,
and say, God, protect me. And the psalmists talk about that.
Yeah.
I think it's Psalm 3 or 4 where it says, Lord, I lay myself to sleep. I lay down to sleep, but it's you that keeps me through the night.
Yeah. And even Psalm 127, that I think a lot of people are familiar with the opening lines of it. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Yeah, sure, great. But then that psalm goes on to talk about how the Lord gives his beloved sleep. Like sleep is a gift. That it's something that God has given us, paired right with that sort of, unless the Lord is behind it, your efforts are not ultimately going to pan out. But at the same time, not only does God give work, he gives rest as a gift as well.
Could you talk about your own resting habits a little bit, and what they look like, and how you excel at them? And
Well, I'll start with I don't excel at them. I do not think this is an area that I'm particularly good at. And it's interesting because as I was talking with my lovely wife about this topic as we were going to discuss it on the podcast, she says to me, oh, you're so good at that. And I'm like, I really don't think I am.
yeah,
Because even when I think about the sort of the rhythms of my week, so to speak, that I reflect on it and think I don't have a lot of time where I'm not probably doing something. So even if I'm watching a basketball game in the evening or relaxing, I'm 9 times out of 10, I've got my laptop open, or I'm reading something, or I'm just sort of maybe kind of chipping away at a project or something that doesn't require my full engagement.
Yeah.
But or maybe it's just responding to emails or doing some of the more mundane tasks of my everyday life. And so I find that for me, because I tend to be a very performance-driven kind of person, that it's actually very challenging for me to actually fully engage in rest.
yeah. I find similar things. I think I'm pretty good at backing off of what I'm doing at my job. So when I leave the seminary, I really generally don't touch email. I pretty regularly don't touch work outside of the seminary building.
Sure.
However, there's always other things. So I'm either working on another project, kind of like you said, or things need to get done around the house, or I just feel the need to move and do lots of little things. And before I know it, we've hit 10, 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to I need to stop. Since we're both not excellent at this, what would healthy rest look like lately? Because and maybe I'll throw this wrench in there. Culture at large seems to be pretty poor at rest, particularly when you get more urban. I think it tends to be a little bit worse at rest. And then they've come in with there's a new term that's sort of been working its way through the culture called self-care. That I find interesting, and it kind of maybe comes at this from a different angle. And just want to hear your reflections on those things.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely, there's a busyness that is a cultural value that we often don't take enough notice of. And what I mean by that is, how often, think about this, both your own response and the response that others give you. When you ask someone, how are you doing? Arguably, you could say the most common response besides a generic good is
busy.
I'm really busy.
Yeah,
busy. Like things are going well, but I'm busy. And then, the expectation is that maybe you list a couple things, right? Yeah, so I'm really busy with my classes, or I'm really busy at work. This is a kind of a busy season. Like, how many times you think back, if you've asked that question, if someone says, I'm doing really well, I feel really rested.
Yeah, when people say that, I go, well, you're lazy.
Yeah,
that's sort of my first thought is like, well, the rest of us are working like dogs here. What the heck are you doing?
Right. Yeah, unless it's someone who's maybe been sick.
Yeah.
Right? If someone's been really sick
with
and they
COVID-19
or some other, global epidemic, pandemic, whatever the term is, that the response then is like, oh, good. I'm glad you've gotten some rest. Like, I know that you've not been feeling well, so I'm glad that you've rested.
Or they're coming off vacation, maybe.
Yeah, that's another one.
That'd be the other place I would expect to hear that.
But it's just not common. And like you said, for many of us, in the back of our minds, we're thinking, well, that must be nice. The rest of us are working like crazy to try to keep up, So I do think that that's one of those dynamics that there's a cultural expectation, and even in ministry, it's not unique to ministry. It's plenty of realms where it's common, but I think in particular in ministry, there is an expectation that you're busy.
Yeah.
That if you are in ministry, that you are supposed to be busy, that you're supposed to be constantly on the clock, constantly meeting with people, prepping for preaching or teaching.
Always available.
Leading meetings, always available for the crisis, those kinds of things. Yeah, I think that's part of our cultural expectation. And some of that feeds into, or is fed into by what we talked about last episode in terms of such an emphasis on productivity and efficiency, that there's this expectation of you're constantly trying to figure out, how can I get more efficient? How can I be more productive and more effective? And I think that there is a bit of a turn in some circles of recognizing that that's not the end all and be all. That's not sustainable long term.
It's not sustainable long term, and I think I find that I'm more productive actually when I stop working. When if I'm constantly taking things home and working longer hours, I find that I'm less productive during those hours.
Yeah, there can certainly be a diminishing returns principle that kicks in when it comes to just, I'm going to work an extra couple hours tonight to try to get ahead or try to get done.
Yeah, and I find this with my friends that constantly go like, oh, I'm so busy. I was up till 2 a.m. working on email, or I was doing X, Y, or Z. And I just had a thought like, and I've never said this to them, so maybe this is the first time they're hearing this publicly, but man, go to bed at 10, sleep a full 8, and then get back at it the next morning. I think you'll probably be more productive.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of one of my most surprising interactions with Don Carson. This was when I was a seminary student.
Oh boy.
And I
love a good Don Carson story.
Yeah, so I was doing an independent study under Dr. Carson, and it was getting to the end of the semester, and I realized I'm not going to be able to finish this by I think the deadline was like a Friday afternoon. So on, say, Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, I stopped in his office, and with sort of fear and trembling coursing through my body, asked for an extension. And I said, if I, could I get this done if I pulled a couple, all-nighter or two in there and got something to you? Could I get it done? Could I get something to you by Friday afternoon? Yeah, I could. But I don't think it would be very good. And so I would appreciate if you'd consider giving me an extension till Monday to be able to produce something that is far better. And he said something that very much surprised me, because I knew a little bit about his own sort of patterns of work and lack of rest.
So hold on. Could we talk about what was the silence like when you finished that question before he spoke? What was the feeling that you were having?
Yeah.
Let's dwell on that for just a second.
Intensified fear and trembling, sure, to be honest, because I had no idea what my prospects were of actually getting that. And given the fact that he was well known for being someone who just didn't sleep a lot. So he would, it was pretty well known that he would go to bed, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then get up at 2 in the morning. And he would write and do his research from, 2 to 6. When the world was quiet and everybody else was sleeping, he was, writing away.
That's incredible.
And the fact that, when that gets known, how do you ask someone like that for, I can't do that?
Yeah, how do you ask that person for an extension? But you walked in there and did it.
I did.
So what happened next?
So I was pleasantly surprised when he said to me, absolutely, I'm happy to grant you that extension. And then he paused and he said to me, sometimes the godliest thing you can do is get a good night of sleep.
I've read that he
uses that quote elsewhere.
Yeah, I've seen that in a book of his before, where he says the godliest thing you can do is get a good night of sleep.
Yeah, and so that was both surprising and encouraging, and I think that it was one of those early sort of signposts along the way for me of realizing that rest is an important piece of the rhythm and routine of life.
And I will say, it could be saying, we could be heard as saying like, oh my goodness, those guys that sleep, 3 hours a night that do all this work aren't resting, aren't trusting. That we could be heard as saying that.
Sure.
However, I think, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, but there are some people that are just gifted that way. They need to sleep only 3 to 4 hours a night, where I much more feel like I need to sleep 7 to 8 hours a night to feel rested and productive.
Sure.
And there was even a time in seminary where I prayed that I would only be able to sleep 4 to 5 hours a night so I could be more productive.
Yeah.
And the Lord has not granted that for me.
Yes. And I do think another feature of this whole discussion of rest is not just on the sort of daily or kind of weekly rhythm, but there are seasons of life, right? Where an extended period of time where you might say, well, because of my work or because of school, this next 8 weeks is just going to be really busy.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to get as much sleep and rest as I would like to or need to. And so it's fair to recognize that, to say, normally I'd get into this kind of, excuse me, a little frog in the throat there.
Yeah.
Normally I would get into this rhythm of, work and productivity and then rest, but I'm going to have to maybe borrow a little bit from the rest time, knowing that at the end of this, there's a week break. And then after that, okay, I can kind of recharge my batteries a little
recalibrate.
bit. Yeah. And that can happen in not just in the academic world, but even in, you think of the accountant who does taxes. Well, this time of year right now is just crazy busy, like lots of responsibilities, lots of clients, who want their taxes done, and they're probably working, 15, 16-hour days sometimes.
Yeah.
And then they maybe get into the summer, and again, I don't know the rhythms of the accountants, but maybe there's a season where it's a little less intense, and so they're able to say, I can take a 2-week vacation here and recharge my batteries.
Yeah, and I think that touches on something that I see a lot. Maybe, and I don't know if it would be explicitly spoken, but it's certainly I feel like I've heard it, and I think it's working its way through our campus and through the Gen Z population. But kind of the idea that we are meant to run as humans, and we should run as humans, always fully rested and ready to go. That this should be our regular feeling in life, that we are going out there and we are fully rested and ready to go. And Matt, is that your experience in life, that you are constantly fully rested and ready to go?
Almost never.
Almost never. If you had to put a percentage on it, where's your battery at on any given day?
I think my sort of normal operating range is probably in the 85 to 90.
Okay.
I'd say that's pretty normal. Now, obviously, depending on circumstances, it can dip as low as 40 or 50 sometimes. I feel like on a day where, depending on what's going on in my life, I might come into the classroom and feel like I am running very low and lack the sort of normal energy and perhaps enthusiasm for the subject that I'm teaching that day, or, especially looking ahead, maybe I'm not a person who's energized by meetings. I don't tend to enjoy meetings.
What?
I know it's a spoiler alert for you, I'm sure. But at the same time, just extensive interaction with people tends to run my batteries low. It's not that I don't like people. It's just that it wears me out to interact with a lot of people. And so if I have back-to-back days or an extended period, we've traveled together, taking students on trips. I think we both have a little bit of a similar experience of we love students. We want to be with them.
Yep.
We love to take them places and expose them to things. But during those trips, we also like to get a little distance and say, all right, everyone can just kind of go do their own thing for a little while, and you and I abscond off to a coffee shop and have some coffee and we read.
Yeah, and honestly, on those trips when I feel like just students bearing down on me, I wake up far earlier, I think, on the road than I do at home.
Yeah,
where I'm up at 5:30, and I'm just to get some alone time, to do some reading, to respond to any emails that need to be responded to, and I think I do quite a bit of. I am more intentional about reading when I travel than when I'm actually at home.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
I also think that one of the ways that we can sort of live out the one another piece of the Christian life in connection with rest is, you think of certain people who often will struggle just because of life circumstance to get rest. So you think of young moms, right? The young mom who's got a couple of kids, and the husband does his best, but he's working 50, 60 hours a week and trying to find ways to, well, how does a young mom get rest when you've got, multiple little kids who need constant attention? And thinking about, well, Kate and I are in a stage of life where our kids are a little bit more self-sufficient. And so offering to, we'll watch your kids so you and your husband can go out and have a nice evening together without kids clinging on you or harassing you. So even just thinking about, are there ways that we can help others experience rest if we have the opportunity to do so?
So, Matt, maybe this is turning a bit of a corner. What are some practical ways that you rest?
Well, one of the things that I try to do is get windows during the week where I'm not working on the laptop or even reading for lecture prep or something like that. Usually I try to fit those into evenings or into afternoons. And also, I'm not good at this, but I'm trying. Putting the phone away. Just putting the phone aside.
Is tough. Yeah.
Because there's an element where, of course, you can say, well, gosh, I'm just relaxing, so I'm just, flipping through Twitter or Facebook or whatever, or Instagram. But inevitably, boom, there pops up the email. oh, I'm reminded, oh, I should be doing that. Like the phone can actually provoke that sense of, I should be doing something right now. I should be doing something right now.
Yeah.
And setting it aside and trying to get away from it a little bit. I'm not especially good at that, but I do think that is one way. And also, for me, part of it is the mental game. It's really okay if I sit down for a Saturday afternoon and watch some college football and I'm not doing anything while I'm doing that.
Yeah.
That's really hard for me. I feel like I should be doing something. So that's more of the mental sort of spiritual side of things, of trying to get mental rest, where even if I'm not physically doing something, I'm so harassed by what I think I should be doing that it's not really that restful. It just stirs up anxiety or sort of that stress in me of, oh gosh, I should be doing that, or like, I should really be paying attention to that, getting to that. And ultimately it comes down to a lack of trust in God's sovereignty. At the bottom line, it's the thinking that I'm going to get things done if I'm just productive, and that's what matters, as opposed to, well, Lord, this is the time you've given me, and these are the things you put on my plate, and this is what I can get done, and the rest I'm trusting that you will accomplish on your own terms.
It's not overt, but
Right.
it's more assumptions that you're making.
Right. And another thing too is sometimes I find that, if I have a full day of teaching and meetings and then I have something in the evening, like on Thursday nights, I have my mentor group, and that's good, and I enjoy that immensely. But after, a full day of teaching in the morning and then the afternoon, and then having that in the evening, I think it's perfectly legitimate to then say, okay, I'm going to take Friday morning off, where since I'm sort of buying back the normally a time where I would be down, I'm engaged in work. So I'm going to try to buy that back at another window during the week where otherwise I might normally work, but in light of this, I'm going to try to buy that back. What about you?
Yeah, I usually I can fall into the millennial trap of, you know what, I'm going to quote unquote rest, and I'm going to sit down and watch Netflix for X number of hours. So I usually try to find, and I don't think that is rest necessarily. I think it can be, but I don't think it's necessarily rest. But I usually try to find some non-vocational things to do, kind of like you're saying. So when I read or do email, lots of times it's things that are in my field, and I enjoy my field. I like my field,
Right.
But if I'm going to read it, it's going to be non-vocational. I want it to be a novel or something like that, or I'm going to do something totally different. Like, we'll get into one of them in the one thing I like this week, but. It could be anything from building something, creating something, or doing some work around my house. I find restful. Like I find some enjoyment out of that while giving me something to do. So non-vocational work.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I'll say one more thing before we move on, because again, we are getting long on our topics here.
Oh boy.
But I think that this can be a special challenge for pastors, or really anyone who maybe works sort of traditional hours, right? If you don't work a sort of traditional 8 to 5 kind of job, it can perhaps feel challenging to get rest as necessary when it comes to trying to find those windows. But I know for pastors, when you think about, for a lot of people, you could perhaps do a Sunday kind of day of rest, not getting legalistic in terms of saying you have to avoid certain things, but just say, as a general rule, Sunday, well, for the pastor, that's a day of work. The being a part of the service, often preaching, like that's a day of work for the pastor in many cases. So trying to take a Monday or something, but even then, can you disconnect entirely where you're not on call, so to speak, that maybe there's another elder who can sort of pick up the slack of, if there's a crisis, another elder can respond to it, and the pastor who preached or something can simply take that full day to disengage, reconnect with family, and kind of recharge their batteries.
Yeah, absolutely. Any resources you would recommend on the topic of rest?
Yeah, so I've got two. One is by David Murray. It's a book called Reset, which has some really helpful biblical and theological and practical help for thinking about getting better rhythms of life when it comes to work and rest and avoiding burnout. And then the second one, another small book, even smaller, is a book by Christopher Ash called Zeal Without Burnout, that I think is not just applicable for ministry people, but people in general in terms of being a passionate follower of Christ, using your time and energy well, and yet not doing it in a way that burns you out and causes some disastrous consequences. What about you?
Yeah. So one book I recently read, The Common Rule by Justin Earley, which I believe came out in 2019, maybe late 2018. And in there he walks through habits of purpose. And one of the best things he does is he includes technology into his habits. So getting rid of turning off the phone for a day. And he has these different habits that help us focus, help us rest, and flourish, I would say, as Christians in a very, very busy world. And so I would highly recommend his stuff. Maybe you don't need to buy the book, but if you can find the habits online, I mean, they're gold. So I mean, just The Common Rule, Justin Earley. I think that the habits are worth it.
Gotcha. All right, who's our athlete for episode 10?
Yeah, that's a great question. So
since we really did not discuss this.
No, we didn't. So some as we read through our list here, Fran Tarkenton, the quarterback for the Vikings, I believe.
Way back in the day, yeah.
Eli Manning, Chipper Jones.
Baseball now, yes. Chipper Jones, yeah.
Walt Frazier.
Nick Legend.
I like that one. Steve Nash. Canada. Pele, the Brazilian soccer player.
Yeah.
Who I read just the other day had 7 children. You just a lot of kids. Anyway, Lionel Messi, also a great soccer player. Do you want to run through your
there've been
pandering to Ohio?
Yeah, absolutely. So there've been 3 pretty legendary Ohio State quarterbacks who've worn the number 10. Rex Kern, who led them to a national championship in 1968. Art Schlichter, who was a young phenom who then ended up kind of flushing away his professional football career by getting into gambling. And then Troy Smith, who won the Heisman Trophy back in 2006, also wore number 10. So a solid number for Ohio State quarterbacks.
Who do you like?
Okay, well, at the risk of alienating some listeners, we are not going to have 2 straight weeks of soccer players.
No, I agree.
Sorry.
As much as I like Pele.
Yeah. I'm comfortable crossing Chipper Jones off the list. Solid baseball player, but not historically great.
Not historically great. Did name his daughter Shay after the Mets stadium because he played so well in that stadium.
Okay.
So,
all right. And I can't go with Eli Manning. I don't know if I can go with Fran Tarkenton either. I mean, that's a throwback, but
the only reason I'd go with Frank is because of the last name.
Tarkenton?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was really one of the first mobile quarterbacks, really, but yeah.
Footage of him is fun to watch.
Yeah.
On NFL film.
He was sort of the precursor to Johnny Manziel. Is really who we're talking about there.
So that if I'm getting our narrowing down right, that brings us to Walt Frazier and Steve Nash, both point guards.
Yeah, I want to go with Steve Nash.
Oh, I want to go Walt Frazier.
I knew it. This is why we should do some show prep on the front end, right?
Goodness. All right. Make your case for Steve.
I understand that within a certain telling of NBA history, Walt Frazier plays a key role. Mm-hmm. But Steve Nash is he 6'2"?
He's 6 foot, I think. I think he's 6 foot.
He's small. And not especially athletic in terms of by NBA standards. And yet he, for a stretch of time, was arguably one of the 2 or 3 best players in the NBA for a several-year period, despite the fact that he could not rely upon his athleticism. And so I'm going to argue that
he's 6'3".
Yeah. Okay, 6'3". Which still by NBA standards is small.
I have a story about. I stood next to Steve Nash one time. He's not 6'3".
Okay.
He's not taller than I'm 6'2". He's not taller than me. He might be a little shorter.
Yeah.
Than me.
So one of those inflated heights. So anyway, all right. Go ahead and make your case for your Nick.
So.
And it needs to be brief because this episode is
it getting long?
Spiraling out of control.
I should keep time over here. Walt Frazier played for the New York Knicks. Won 2 championships as a player. Something that Steve Nash did not do.
Okay.
And not only was an excellent player, he's been an excellent broadcaster. And so you can catch him on Madison Square Garden Network. I almost said MSG. That's pandering to our New York crowd that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so he is on there, and he is one of the most interestingly dressed individuals in sports.
That's true.
And so I think he's a unique character. If you have not seen a 30 for 30 when the Garden was Eden, speaking of Madison Square Garden, totally worth it.
Okay.
Totally worth it. But since I really pushed for David Wright, I will allow you to make the final call here.
Well, here's what's going to push me over the edge with Steve Nash. He's Canadian.
We have one Canadian listener, from what I understand.
I'm just saying that when it comes to broadening the international scope of our appeal.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, how many times are we going to get to go with a Canadian until we get to Wayne Gretzky at 99?
Until we get to Wayne Gretzky at 99.
Like, that's a ways away.
Well, hey, there's some other ones in there, but yeah, I hear you.
All right.
So Steve Nash.
I don't want to twist your arm on this, but
I handed this over to you.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Steve Nash.
Steve Nash it is.
Okay, Steve Nash it is. All right. One thing you like this week, John.
Okay. One thing, a non-vocational thing that I started doing this week, or not this week, but the last couple of weeks, I've been making soft pretzels from scratch at home, and it's been just a blast. It's been a lot of fun.
I guess the pressing question that I have is, are those pretzels making you thirsty?
A little Seinfeld reference.
Always. Yeah, that's a nice little hobby you're picking up there.
It's been fun, yeah, okay. And they're delicious.
Okay,
oh my goodness.
All right. Well, I'm happy to test that hypothesis if you want to bring one my way.
You know what? They don't last very long. They're so good.
Maybe when we do the premarital counseling coming up in the weeks ahead, we could work on that.
Yeah.
All right, for me, my one thing I like this week is the fact that this past week was the beginning of the Indiana high school basketball sectional tournaments. And so just Indiana basketball, high school basketball at its best in terms of the hysteria and the close games and the intensity. And it was fun to see my own Lakeland Christian Academy, where I used to coach and where my wife still teaches, won only their second sectional game in program history.
Nice.
Now, they've only been in the sectional competitions the last probably 8 years, I think now. So that was fun, and just a fun time of year that I enjoy with my boys. So, well, between coronavirus, rest, March Madness, pretzels, we, by definition, have accomplished our mission of covering our various and sundry topics. And so, until next time, the Lord bless you all real good.